For Keaton, cinema was important. It wasn't the camera nailed to the floor or nailed to the moving truck. It was jokes that worked because of the movie camera. It was cinema itself that became the joke.
I think a lot of my daring in terms of breaking the fourth wall came from Keaton, who, when Sherlock Jr. pointed out that it's a movie. And I'm always pointing out somewhere in my films that we're making a movie. Like when I did Spaceballs.
That's the voice of Mel Brooks, of course, as an introduction into The Great Buster, a celebration. I'm delighted to say I've been joined by Peter Bogdanovich. Hello, Peter. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. How are you? I'm in
Okay.
LA.
Okay. Oh, you're in Los Angeles. So we've got you up at some crazy time?
Yeah, we're a little bit crazier than not as crazy as shooting a picture, but.
Do you have coffee and croissant or something? Everything that you need to get through this.
I'm okay. I got some water. I'll get me through it. I'll get me through it. I wish I was in London. I like London better than LA.
Oh, well, that's very nice of you. We wish we were in LA most of the time. But anyway, so the first point to say is we're thrilled that you're on the program. Thank you for making time for us. Second point, just tell us about how you came to make, I know you already said you're a lifelong fan, but tell us how you came to make this documentary about Buster Keaton.
Well, it's very simple, really. Charles Cohen has all the Keaton films. He somehow has the rights to all the Keaton films. I think he certainly has prints of all of them, and he called me. We know each other because we've almost done a couple of things together. And he called me and said, "Would you do a documentary on Buster?" And I said, "Yep, sure." And that was it. So I decided to write it and narrate it myself, which I hadn't done before. But I felt very personal about Buster. I don't know why, but I just have a connection to him or something. And his story touches me, and I think his work is so brave and so brilliant that it's just overwhelming, really, how brilliant he was. And so I was very happy to do it. I enjoyed making it. I think the one, everybody says you got to have at least one good idea on a picture. And so I had one good idea, which was to save the great films for the end, rather than to put them in the middle where they happened. I didn't want to end with a sad Buster. I didn't want to end with the 20 years that he had when he was not in favor and no money and couldn't work and became an alcoholic and all that. I just didn't know. I wanted to deal with that, but I wanted to deal with it early on, get rid of it, and then at the end go back to the great features that are still extraordinary.
I think that's one of the things that marks this out from the way anyone else would have made the film, Peter, is the fact that you want to finish with that as a kind of as a triumphant half hour, really celebrating the very best of what Buster Keaton did. But there were loads of things in there that I was learning. I mean, every minute I'm learning something about him. But I didn't know about the three Keatons. I mean, just picking up the story right at the beginning, that his vaudeville background, the fact he was born in a trunk, and the fact that his dad could have been put away because they were so violent towards their son because the act demanded that.
Yeah. Well, it's quite amazing. But he obviously loved the laughter of hearing the laughter of the audience. It inspired him, and he just liked to make people laugh. My parents, my mother and father, loved Buster Keaton, and my father particularly. My father was almost 20 years older than my mother, and so my father was actually 30 years old when sound came in. So he grew up with silent pictures, and he loved silent pictures. And he took me to when I was about 5 or 6 years old. He took me to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and I saw Keaton and Chaplin and Harold Lloyd, and I particularly was struck by Keaton, and so it's been a long love affair. way back when I was 5 years old.
Silent cinema is having a huge revival at the moment. I play in a band who accompany silent movies, and it's been a real privilege to play music to silent movies. And the more I watch, the more I think that silent cinema is the purest form of cinema because it's all to do with the physicality and the look. Do you think that silent movies still resonate with modern audiences in the way they used to? Because I think they have a real place in modern cinema.
Well, I think they do have a place, but the problem is, people aren't used to that. They're used to hearing dialogue, and it's to a lot of people it's strange to not have any, not to have dialogue, But of course, pure cinema, as Hitchcock used to call it, is the visual. It's all told visually, and it took some time to figure out how to do that. And by the time, as Chaplin said, just when we got it right, it was over. Because when you look at films made in 1928, the last year of silent pictures, it's quite extraordinary what they were doing, and what they could do. And Keaton as well. I mean, he some extraordinary things he did.
We see, Peter, in your film, we see contributions from Sybil Shepherd and Quentin Tarantino and Werner Herzog, Mel Brooks. We heard that little clip at the beginning, Dick Van Dyke and Carl Reiner. And one of the message that you come away with through every kind of frame of your film is that Keaton was one of the inventors of cinema. Could you just explain a bit why that is the case and why so many people are convinced that he is one of the inventors of modern cinema?
Well, everybody who made films in the 20s, the late teens and 20s, everybody who made films was in a way inventing movies. It was an ongoing thing, and the Russians like Pudovkin and all those guys, they were all inventors of movies. It was all happening. It was an amazing art form. And it is tragic that it was killed off by sound. Orson Welles told me that his father took him when he was about 10 or something to see a part, what they call the part talkie. It was the earliest sound films were part talkies, and Orson's father took him into the thing, and it played for about 10 minutes, and as Orson said, he pulled me up the aisle, saying, "This ends movies forever."
It is extraordinary watching the movie that there are so many clips of Buster Keaton performing feats that are physically astonishing. Obviously, I know we end up with with the classic. There is one moment when there's a particular scene in which a car drives past him and he grabs the car and the car pulls him off screen, and you have Dick Van Dyke saying, "I asked him, did they speed the film up? He said no." And you think, I don't understand how he could even be physically in one piece after doing that stunt.
It's amazing. But he does a lot of them all the way through the picture. He does these elaborate tumbles and falls, and it was just amazing. He would go to any extreme to get a laugh.
Some of the things that people will find fascinating, Peter, are the clips that we haven't seen. And I hadn't seen him doing that, most of the television work that you show us, certainly none of the commercials that he did. But I love the sequences in Candid Camera where he's just he's doing a little silent routine next to some people in a cafe. They are absolutely joyous, aren't they?
Oh, very, very wonderful. Just wonderful. He loved to make people laugh. It was a great thing. Preston Sturges made a very fine movie in the 40s called Sullivan's Travels, and in which basically it's a celebration of making people laugh. And Joel McCrea has a great last speech in which he says something like, it doesn't take much, but there's nothing like laughter. I just said that badly, but I can't remember the exact line, but it's a beautiful speech about, it isn't much, but it's a great thing to be able to make people laugh.
Yeah. What was the problem, Peter, about MGM? Why was that the big mistake?
Because they were very structured. It was very structured. Everything was timed. They had everything was done, in order in kind of an order. But Buster was free. It was a freeness, a kind of freedom, and Metro was kind of locked you into a certain way, and everything was. They couldn't just make take a license and go off make something something they had an idea to do. It wasn't planned. It was like saying you can't improvise. You got to stick to the schedule, stick to the budget and the schedule. They absolutely ruined him. They had no idea what to do with him, and he unfortunately was. I think he was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? He was humbled by the fact that these people had all the money and they were the bosses and so on, and he couldn't fight that.